in conversation here now with Edgar Heinrich, who's the head of design for BMW Motorrad, and of course that is the bike that all of you have been waiting to see and hear about. Edgar, tell us about the design language of this bike. Talk us through some of the aspects of it and the fact that you were in India and what has influenced you from there.
Yeah, that's a long question. Basically, this is the G310R, obviously, and we understand it as the small sibling of the S1000R, the bike what you see here. And it's very important because this is basically the big brother, 160 horsepower, have everything, lots of performance, lots of power. And this is meant to be, the small sibling. Not everybody wants to have a big bike or can't afford a big bike, but this has, as you see, can very clearly, it has the same design cues. It has all the typical S1000R icons, what you also have on the big sibling. And that's very important because you might be aspirational for this bike, but you will not be able to buy it maybe. But you definitely can afford or can buy this bike, and everything is in there, just a little bit smaller.
What about being in India, knowing the Indians well? What part of that influenced things in this design for you?
We felt that time is right to have a smaller bike. We did not have bikes below 500cc, but for two reasons we felt it's definitely right. First of all, we want to attack these emerging markets like India, and I'm very aware that it's not about educating Indian market. They are already educated, but the time is definitely right for these guys to get these modern bikes, and there is already modern bikes there, and we think we can really fill the BMW gap there. So this bike is one, the GS is the other one. Maybe a little bit a new segment for India, but again, time is right for getting segmentation into India.
And tell us a little bit more, if you could just talk us through the design of the bike and certain of the elements. What are your favorite parts of the design? What were the challenges and what were the things, engineering and product and fitting everything in versus I want this on my design?
Like I always say, first of all, the proportion of the bike is very important. It's a naked sports bike. It should have a certain sense of aggressivity. That means the masses have to be concentrated in the front, where you have the engine, where the power is located. The tail has to be very short and very stubby and upright. You have to have a very transparent kind of back area. So the mass is up front here, the lightness down here. And then you need the front light. The front light has to be very much integrated into the front. It's almost part of the front here. It's very near to the fork, and everything is very compact. It's basically like a bull, The masses are the front, the bulldog, and it's very light at the back. This is the both main proportion. And then, of course, at the formal language, you have these kind of aggressive things, which is very much an icon of the big sibling, as I mentioned before. You have very short fenders, and of course you have all the small detailing, which makes it a sports bike. You have the quality, the color trim, and all the details like the calipers and this kind of stuff.
You were talking about yourself being in India and you having sort of an off-road adventure bike would just help you sort of go really quickly over all our kind of road conditions and speed breakers and things like that, whereas you found other people would wonder how and why. And do you think that sort of influences you when you're building a bike that needs to suit these various kind of markets, and do you think that comes into your design now, that sort of feeling of knowing the conditions in that place?
I think we had long discussions on the 310 GS, because GS or off-road bikes not being very much known in India. I mean, and I was always wondering, because I think this would be a perfect terrain for an off-road bike. like you mentioned, I had this off-road bike, this little off-road bike, and I mean I could go over speed bumps very easily. That was super comfortable, for example. So I think it's definitely time for GS kind of bikes to conquer the Indian customers.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you.
Yeah, most welcome.